Hey Phil, this is Cameron.
Hey, what's up, Cam?
Man, I gotta talk to you about something. Have you been watching the news?
Dude, what is going on? What's up, everybody? I'm Phil.
And I'm Cameron.
Two Navy vets, just here to talk politics.
And we're here with some differing views, but we're here to have a civil and a healthy discussion.
Thanks for tuning in to Pocket Politics. What's up, everybody, and welcome back to the 5th episode of Pocket Politics. How are you doing, Cam?
Hey, doing well today. Looking forward to another great discussion.
Fantastic. Myself as well. We've got a lot to talk about. And first, let me just start off by saying, I think we're officially worldwide, right?
Sounds that way, at least based on what we can see from the data.
Yeah, looking at our analytics, we've got our first listens from outside of the United States. And not just outside of the United States, but a long ways away, too, right?
Way out in the Indian Ocean.
Fantastic. So that is good. And then also, based on some of our listener feedback, we are also multi-service now. So we've got verified feedback from an Air Force veteran who's listening to us. So that's also good.
We're growing our fan club.
Yeah. So please, if you are out there, we'll talk about it in a little bit. But like, subscribe, share. And where do we start today, Cam?
Well, a lot in the news, as always, it seems like these days. So why don't we get started here with our first topic coming up. Steve Bannon found guilty this week. Phil, what do you think?
I think he's a prick, yeah. But for realistically, though, there was no other choice for the jury to find him guilty on both counts, right? But before we dig into them finding him guilty, can we talk a little bit about what he tried to do at the beginning of the week, where he came out and basically said, oh, January 6th committee, now that the judge is actually going to, make me go to this trial and see my case, can we set up a term where I can speak with you? Well, look, he had already failed to comply with the subpoena. You can't say no one day and then say yes a day later and expect you still failed to comply. So, of course he was guilty.
Yeah.
And as it shows, he thought he was going to wiggle his way out of this because his defense had they were in shambles. It was reported as being one of the worst defenses in a trial ever. So they were not even prepared for him to go to this trial, it looks like.
I will be honest with you. To me, this was almost not news because it's not shocking. I don't think anybody's shocked that he was found guilty. I mean, yes, it's newsworthy, but at the end of the day, I don't think anybody's surprised sitting there.
Yeah, and if you don't know who he is, let's just be real. We like to talk about the fact that we're veterans, and we like to, give shout-outs to people who have served honorably. Unfortunately, I can't go without mentioning that he was a naval officer for 8 years.
Well, yeah, I will just say this, for people that don't know a lot about Steve Bannon, Bannon really, I think, was the brains behind Donald Trump. Donald Trump brought the message. Bannon showed him how. Bannon marketed that message.
Absolutely, yeah. I don't think he would have gotten elected if it hadn't been for Bannon.
Yeah, I don't think so either. Bannon is the brains behind this. But he's now facing 30 days to 1 year in jail, I think, for each count, which means he could
possibly two years in jail at the most, but he probably won't get that. And
probably not. Like I said, I don't find this incredibly newsworthy just because, you said it. He strolls into the courtroom. They have basically no defense planned. He sits there. I don't even think they examined or cross-examined Bannon at all, or examined Bannon at all, put him on the stand. The other thing with Steve Bannon, at the end of the day, my thing with him is either grow a beard or shave. The dude runs around with a 2-day stubble all the time in his face.
You don't like that? You don't think he's a good-looking dude?
No.
Is it weird that it looks like he wore the same clothes to both days?
I don't think he ever changes clothes.
Yeah,
he's always in that same dark shirt with a dark jacket.
Yeah, but it's 3 dark shirts.
Yeah,
there's a dark shirt and then a dark shirt that's fully buttoned on top of it, and then a half-buttoned dark shirt, and then a suit jacket.
Yeah, they're always talking about the 3 shirts that he's got.
And it's July.
Yeah,
too.
That's what I'm saying. It was in the middle of a heat wave. Yeah. And he's standing out there with these 3 or 4 layers of shirts and such on.
Yeah.
And with his 3-day stubble or whatever. Again, grow the beard, that's fine. Grow it out or shave it. But, he's constantly running around with these 2 or 3 days of stubble. And
I'm starting to get a little offended right now.
Yeah, well, again... grow it or shave it, man. Like,
Come on now.
unless you're
Come
trying
on
to
now.
pull the Bannon.
This is a military weekend, man. This is the no shaves.
Yeah. All right. Well, with that being said, I think we've kind of wrapped up the whole Bannon thing there. Why don't we move on to Ted Cruz? He had some interesting statements out about same-sex marriage. Phil, what do you think on that one?
I'm starting to wonder if you're just if you're like trying to patronize me or something. It's like you just wanted to come today and talk about all these horrible human beings, and are you trolling me? What's going on right now?
I am not just talking news.
Yeah, I mean, is that where we're going? Is that what we want to do in this country?
Well, so some background. So what Ted Cruz has said is that he thinks the Supreme Court in their 2015 Obergefell v. Hodges they were clearly wrong, basically legalizing same-sex marriage across the nation. Cruz thinks that was a very poor decision, and so that's where he's now pushing this. He has come out and said he doesn't think the Supreme Court will overturn it, but he wants it looked at anyway. And so
Why are we doing this?
well, Cruz himself has been against same-sex marriage for years. I mean, this is nothing new to Ted Cruz. You ask why we're doing it. I will be honest with you. You've heard me say this, I think, in almost every episode now that we've done. But again, the Republican Party has got to get away from these social issues. And I mean, here is Ted Cruz again. They're already getting beat up on the abortion thing, and here's Ted Cruz out there now saying, "Well, while we're at it, why don't we take a good hard look at the same-sex marriage?" And oh, by the way, Clarence Thomas has said he's into looking at it. So
I mean, this is the same guy though that, keep in mind, like, supported the former president even after he said his wife was ugly.
he did, going back to the primaries during that time. But I just
This guy is like literally the biggest turncoat piece of crap senator we have in office. I mean, there's some pretty bad ones in there, but Ted Cruz is he's really a shitty human being.
Ted Cruz he certainly has a big following though around the country. There's no doubt he holds a lot of pull in the Republican
He's got a
Party
following
right
in
now.
Mexico probably too.
There's no doubt he's got a following. He's got pull. I think what is a takeaway for this is that, and for our listeners and such, and for people just kind of around the country, is to look at, hey, abortion was one thing. It looks like same-sex marriage may be getting looked at least a little closer than some may have thought a few months ago. So, is same-sex marriage really on the chopping block, or do you think this is just a smoke signal or some smoke that Cruz is billowing?
Well, I think it is on the chopping block. I think it's something definitely that they're going to look at the Supreme Court level, especially with the way the Supreme Court is set up these days. But I also think that there's a good possibility that the Senate will codify it soon. And
So with that,
but I mean 60 votes is a hard.
now you mentioned that the marriage equality bill did pass the House. There
Yes,
was a bill
yeah.
that passed recently through the House, and from what I've heard or what I've seen, there is some Senate support for that on both sides of the aisle.
Yeah, but there's Senate support on both sides of the aisle for Build Back Better, and there's Senate support on both sides of the aisle for larger gun reform than what we got. Just because there's Senate support on both sides of the aisle doesn't mean it's going to go through. I mean, keep in mind...
And from what I'm reading, though, there was a number of senators said that they were for this. I don't have them listed down or even remember who all they were, but there was actually a fair number of Republican senators that said they were definitely looking at that, considering going along with it. So
I'm not disagreeing, but we could flash back to last week and talk about how, Joe Manchin makes these statements like, hey, I'm willing to come to the table if these are met. And then they go back and they change the way the legislation is written. And then Joe Manchin, at the last minute, tells some reporter. He doesn't even tell the Senate. He tells a reporter that I'm backing out of this and I'm not going to support it. So, yeah, I get it. There's people on both sides of the aisle. But does that mean it passes? I don't necessarily think so.
okay, well, there is a chance on this one. I think again there is some Republican interest in this one in getting it pushed through. We'll see, though. It did get through the House. We'll see it going through the Senate. But I will say this, the Supreme Court Thomas has said that he wants to look at now. Alito, after abortion, had said, "Oh, don't worry, I'm not going to take this to any of these other long-standing precedents." Well, I guess the gay marriage one isn't a long-standing precedent, but I'm not going to go back to precedent anything else. But do you think? I mean, do you really think Alito would sit quietly on this one, or do you think he'd jump all over it?
Let me ask you: do you think this is the first time we've been lied to by a Supreme Court justice?
I mean, with that being said, I don't.
I basically don't trust anybody at this point.
Yeah, I think you're right when you're talking about some of the other justices and they're talking about their Roe v. Wade and such. I think if it was dangled out there, I think the way the Supreme Court sits now, I think they'd be all over this.
Absolutely, yeah. Like I said, I don't trust them. I don't give them any credibility on their word. They just don't. They haven't earned it at this point, and they've honestly violated the trust of a lot of Americans at this point. Moving on, you want to talk about the House? I mean, there's like some meat in there that that kind of, some of it went under the radar. I think when we were talking, you didn't even know about some of these things, but 194 Republicans. Now, granted, it passed, so it's good that it passed, but 194 Republicans voted against the contraception bill. I mean, what's that all about?
So the House pushed through a bill on protecting contraception across the nation. 225 Democrats voted for it. Or I'm sorry, 225 House members voted for it. 194 were opposed to it. It did draw all Democrats voted for it, and then there were 8 Republicans that voted for it as well. And the 8 Republicans were Liz Cheney from Wyoming, John Katko, from New York, Adam Kinzinger from Illinois, Nancy Mace from South Carolina, Fred Upton from Michigan, Brian Fitzpatrick from Pennsylvania, Maria Salazar from Florida, Anthony Gonzalez from Ohio. Most of these are kind of moderate Republicans. The one that shocks me, though, honestly, is Liz Cheney.
Well, okay, I gotcha, and we've talked about this, but before we highlight the 8 Republicans that voted for it, like they're like some hero or something, let's keep in mind this is birth control. Access to birth control. This is access to condoms. Right? What? I don't even, like, I can't even, like, talk about the 8 Republicans that voted for it without just, like, trying to wrap my head around the 194 that voted against it. 194 are against access to, like, condoms and birth control?
I don't know exactly which birth control was even outlined in the bill, but
it seems ridiculous.
Generic, like, as you will, I guess, or generic birth control as a whole. I think the Republicans that voted against it were largely saying they thought this should be up to the states. Was, I think, the key argument that I was hearing and seeing come through with that. Going back, I want to go back to Liz Cheney, though. Okay. I was surprised. Hang on. Just hear me out on this.
Well,
I was surprised with Cheney, though. I was surprised with Cheney, though, just because the 8, and the reason I read them off is because they're largely moderate Republicans. Liz Cheney has not been a moderate Republican. I mean, she has voted staunchly conservative for many years, so I don't know. Is Liz Cheney starting to soften her views on some things?
I mean, I think so. I mean, based on her performance with the January 6th committee, I think she is. But again, regardless of whether your fundamental belief is that it should be a state issue, not a federal issue, why can't we just do this? Like, is that really a reason to vote against it? It's so stupid. Like, what? Republicans are literally digging their own grave at this point. I mean,
well, you've heard me say it that I again, and this ties into what we talked about earlier with the same-sex marriage. The Republicans struggle with these social issues right now, and contraception could be, again, this could be used against them here this fall in the midterms. I can see the same-sex marriage thing going against them in the midterms potentially. You and I have talked about this at length. The abortion thing is blown up on them. I think that's blown up more than they thought it was going to. So, my own views, I want to see the Republicans get away from the social issues and run on things like the economy and the inflation and the things that voters, quite honestly, are concerned with. And I think there's enough meat out there for the Republicans to be working on right now that they don't need to be delving into things like contraceptions and
I get
same-sex
it.
marriage.
I
and
get it,
things.
but guess what? The Democrats have to bring this stuff up in order to message, because this is the only way that they are able to identify what is going on and what is going wrong with the Republican Party right now.
Now, I agree with you with what you just said about the messaging. I will tell you, I think the Democrats need to be, in their playbook, they need to be boxing all this up and ready to bring it out.
Yeah, I mean, not only that, but they also voted against, Amber Alert style notifications for active shooter events, which it's like we kind of heard Matt Gaetz' argument that he's like, hypothetically, if there was a concert or a crowded stadium event and everybody got this notification at one time, great. Hypotheticals, I could make a hypothetical about anything, right? So I think it's a shitty argument.
That one had, though, 40-some Republicans that voted for that one.
Yeah, a little bit more than
that one had definitely
for,
more. But I'd say 40-some. I don't remember the exact number. That one had more Republican support. But you're right, Gaetz. I think Gaetz' argument, well, you just said kind of part of it, but I think there was also some other Republicans that said, I want to see more of how this bill is going to be used before I just vote on it. In other words, what are the parameters and how are we outlining it, et cetera, et cetera. But that was a bipartisan bill. Fred Upton from Michigan, I think, was a co-sponsor in that bill. So
absolutely,
that was a bipartisan bill.
Absolutely,
there's definitely some Republicans that are for that bill. I mean, certainly their names are on it for some of them. So I wouldn't say that's all Republicans by any means are against that bill.
No, but it's still 150 plus of them were against that bill. And this is, if the Democrats want to keep rolling with this, they just need to keep pushing common sense bills to the House floor and getting a vote on it and then messaging on those votes, right? Is why are Republicans effectively in this day, or a majority of them in the House and Senate, opposed to getting anything done? Why are they opposed to getting stuff done?
Well, going back to, actually I was going to go back to the contraception bill, but to answer your question right now, people are playing politics. That's what they're doing.
I know, but
they're playing politics.
Yeah, but it's bullshit.
But both sides do it, and we've seen it play out through history. Now,
okay,
I'm not.
Both sides do it.
Both sides
do it is a stark generalization of the fact that Republicans have been a lot more active in frustrating the growth and progress in our country than Democrats have. I will agree that yes, to an extent, both sides do it. But that is a generalization that does not apply to the Democratic Party the same way that it applies to the Republican Party.
I think if we go back through history, though, we will see the Democrats have been they've been obstructionists on this.
Okay, you're right. 250 years of time. Democrats have made mistakes. Granted, they were a completely different party 100 years ago than they are now.
And I'm not going to argue that.
But again, that is a very stark generalization of the facts.
But let's
if we're talking about the time that we're living in right now.
Let's go back to this contraception bill itself, though, where we started with this, okay? I wanted to point this out, that while it has gotten through the House, they say it's unlikely to get through the Senate.
Of course it is.
There is not a lot of Republican favorability there for this
bill,
at least in the Senate.
Yeah, because we're being because a vast majority of the country, 70 plus people, are being overwhelmed by a small, religious minority that has these fundamental beliefs and wants that to control how the country is operated. And guess what? We're going back in time. And not only are we going back in time, but we're falling behind other nations in the world that are developed nations. We're falling behind them in everything.
So I did see where there was some Republican support for this, though, in the Senate. I think Susan Collins, I think Lisa Murkowski, or some variation of it. I think they want to chop on it a little bit.
The Democrats can rely on Collins and Murkowski for just about everything.
They are considered pretty moderate, and they have gotten a lot of support from those two through the years. But again, this is a bill. It got through the House. Unlikely to see it get through the Senate. I want to shift gears into something that happened out in California, and this is a California gun control bill that they've got out there now that just passed, that has been actually modeled after Texas's abortion bill.
Yep, I think it's genius. I mean, I heard about this for the first time a couple of months ago, I think, when Gavin Newsom first, said he was going to do this. But We talked about him a little last week, and Gavin Newsom is really starting to make a name for himself. And so this whole, ability for people to rat out their neighbors and basically get a bounty based on guns and all this other stuff, mirroring the Texas abortion bill, is genius.
Basically, what the bill says, or kind of trying to just kind of summarize it, allows Californians to sue those that are making, selling, transporting, or distributing illegal assault or ghost guns for at least $10,000.
Yep.
Now, we said it earlier, this has been modeled after the Texas abortion law. There is some people certainly opposing it. The California ACLU opposes it and says, hey, we weren't a fan of the Texas law, and we're not a fan of California's now copying it. So
I agree, but if the Supreme Court is going to allow Texas to kind of create that lawsuit / bounty system, and they're going to uphold that, I think Gavin Newsom's point is that, okay, then you can't rule against me when I do this for something else that you do like.
You mentioned Newsom, so what Gavin Newsom has done is he's now, as of this week at least, run some full-page ads in several different Texas newspapers promoting it.
Yep.
And basically, I think the ads essentially say, hey, in Texas, you said you're protecting life with outlawing abortion or almost eliminating abortion, and I'm going to do the same thing with guns in my state. I think now seeing Gavin Newsom, we talked about a week or two ago how he's got his ads running in Florida, or at least did have ads running in Florida. I see him running in Texas. It really makes me wonder if Gavin Newsom is not going to is serious about running for president.
I think he's getting there. If he's not serious about doing it now, it's not going to be that long. He's making a national name for himself. Again, I'm not a huge fan, especially after living in California for several years, but I would support that. I'm not a huge fan, but I think that's what he's doing, and I don't think he would necessarily be a bad candidate.
So I will say that with Newsom looking at running or possibly getting in the ring, he brings name recognition. I will say that. He brings name recognition.
I mean, he's the governor of the 6th largest economy in the world, right? Or is it 6th or 4th? Something like that. It's a huge...
It's up there. I mean, very populated state. There's a lot going on in California. And so he can bring that to his resume. We've seen Newsom be pretty vocal about a lot of social issues and such and pushing them in California. So I think there would be some support if he did choose to run. Obviously we haven't heard him say it, but every time I hear about him running an ad in another state, I have to wonder if I at least in my mind see him trying to run for president. And I do. I think he's building a following. I will say that as far as this bill goes, like I said, there's a lot opposing it, but he's doing what I think he sees a chance to get in there. He feels passionately about guns, feels he can get in and do something, and kind of, I don't know if I want to say threw it back in the face of Texas, but at least is trying to, and I don't know if throw it back in their face is the right word, but trying to just play ball. Like, hey, Texas got it, I can get something similar.
Yeah,
I'm not saying I'm a fan of it. I'm just saying I think that's how he's doing this.
Yeah, and I think he's also kind of doing what governors do to help out other states with their own parties before elections, right? I think this is going to help Beto O'Rourke out in Texas, and I think his ads in Florida are going to help out the opposition to Ron DeSantis. I mean, I think all of those things are kind of playing out, and that's why he's targeting these states. At this time, that's why he's targeting these states.
It may help with an uptick or two, but I think DeSantis is safe in Florida, and I think Abbott is even safer in Texas. We've talked about these before. You think
Abbott is safer than DeSantis?
I do. I think Abbott is very safe in Texas.
Okay. Well, I'm not a gambler, but I'll bet you a handshake or something on that, because I think Abbott's going to lose.
I said it a couple weeks ago when we were talking about the Texas race. I don't see any way Beto O'Rourke beats him in Texas. Texans Texans, we talked about this, but
Yeah,
Texans
well-
love their guns and all that. I don't want to get too
We
far
do, yeah,
off.
we don't
track
need
here
to.
on
We
this.
don't need to go on this because that's a separate topic, and we've already kind of hit
But
it.
we can do the handshake bet. And
Okay.
We'll see how that plays
Perfect.
out later in the year. With that, but I did want to talk about that California bill because it's certainly been in the news. I want to shift gears here a minute, and I want to read what a new poll from CNN was that came out this week. And that is that 67% of registered voters are unhappy with the Democratic Party and 65% are unhappy with the Republican Party. So a lot of just dissatisfaction there. And there are concerns that have been listed. And topping the concerns of these people that were polled, the number one was the economy. 69% of those opposed are concerned about the economy right now.
Yeah,
60
but also keep in mind there's probably 69% of Americans who don't understand at all the
Okay.
economy.
But at the end of the day, they're going to go vote. 67% are concerned with inflation. Voting rights and election integrity is at the forefront of 61%. Gun policy is 60%.
Which the real quick, the voting thing, I would love to see broken down by party
Well,
because I think that's going to show you a big difference in dynamic.
Let's just get on with it. Let me read the rest of these here, and then we can certainly pick them apart.
Okay.
But education is 51%. Abortion is 50%. Crime is 49%. Immigration, 42%. Climate change, 34%. And coronavirus pandemic, 26%. This tells us right here in this poll. Economy is what's driving people right now. Mm-hmm. And whether they understand it or not, these are people that are going to go vote, and they're looking at the economy and the inflation, especially that inflation. I mean, that's right behind 67%. This just shows us that's what's going to drive people this fall.
I agree, and that's why Democrats need to do a better job in messaging about the economy. Because look, if you look at the statistics, the economy has been better under Democrats more so than Republicans, right? For like the past 50 years. It's proven, right? The Democrats in the past 50 years have done a better job on the economy in their whole term than the Republicans have.
People don't look at it like that, though, when they go to vote. They
But,
vote on
hey,
emotion and
I
what's
know, but
happening right
that's
now.
why you and I are here talking about it,
And-
so that people can hear this because it's the truth.
But the Democrats aren't messaging it.
I know, but I
They are
said,
not.
the Democrats have to get out, and Democratic listeners, the people who are more on my side than on Cam, which apparently is fewer than the opposite, but those people need to get out and message with their family and friends and the people that they work with and all that stuff because the Democrats do a better job.
Here's what people are talking about. Here's what the Republicans are certainly saying. Hey, remember 2 years ago, what were you paying for gas?
No, I got
that
it.
resonates.
I got it.
And that's what resonates. So, again, we talk about social issues, and they are up there. I
Yeah,
mean,
but guess who consistently votes in favor of big oil, right? Which party is that?
Okay.
Which party is that? I mean, then those are the things that we have to start talking about.
So
because
it's-
the Republicans are the ones that are driving that.
It's
Despite
funny,
the fact
though-
that Joe Biden is in office right now, the Republicans are the ones that are
He's
driving that.
certainly taking credit for gas dropping 50 cents the last week, which was interesting because a few months ago he said, I have nothing to do with gas prices, and now he's all over the media saying,
Yeah,
look what I've done. Gas is going
Okay,
down.
but I could turn that. Let me flip this upside down. Is a couple of weeks ago, everybody was saying this is all the president's fault, even though it's not. It really has nothing to do with him. And then when he tries to take credit, because he's like, well, if you guys are going to blame me, then when it goes down, I'm going to take credit. And then when he tries to take credit for it, Fox News and various other media outlets are like, oh, well, why is he trying to take credit for this? So I see where you're coming at it, but I'm saying is that people can't blame him for something that he's not responsible for, and then give him no credit when results come. Now, granted, he's not responsible for either the prices going up or the prices going down. However, you can't have your cake and eat it too, Cameron.
So, I mean, why message that at all, right? I mean, you're saying he's not responsible for either one. That's what voters are saying. Well, 1 minute you said you weren't, now you're taking credit for it.
No, voters are saying, we blamed you for this problem, but we don't want you to be able to take credit for it when it starts to get fixed.
On the front of social issues, though, what is out there is we do see gun policy at 60% of people are concerned about it.
You know what concerns me?
Education at 51.
You know what concerns me is that guns are higher priority than education.
Well, it's on the voters' minds.
I know, and that should be a wake-up call to America.
Abortion sitting at 50%.
The same as schools.
Crime at 49%.
Cameron, what country are we living in? This is insane that schools and education has the same priority as abortion. Now, granted, that's probably the lack of abortion is where that concern is coming from, which I agree with.
I think that abortion thing is driven largely by the Roe v. Wade. And again, these are just blanket statements. We don't know when it says education, it just says education. We don't know exactly what.
Yeah.
Even the gun policy. To be fair, it says gun policy, but we don't know the percentage of those for or against.
Those could actually be completely tied together because it turns out that guns are killing kids in schools, which is very much an education issue.
To an extent.
I mean, dying in school is an issue with education, right?
One of the ones I found interesting, and climate change, only 34%. This, and I know the Democrats have been all over the climate change thing, but this poll shows us voters aren't that concerned.
Yeah, which is funny because all the other stuff doesn't matter if we burn the planet to the ground. You know, it's just kind of one of those.
But what this poll tells us is what is on the minds of voters. And what I've been saying, and a lot of people have been saying, is that people are hurting. The economy is hurting people. Inflation is hurting people. And whether the president has direct things to do with it or not, people blame the person in charge, right? They say, hey, ultimately accountable, all that stuff. We see examples of that in the military all the time. People that maybe they don't directly have something or affect something or whatever. They don't directly do something wrong, but someone under their charge does, and so they are ultimately accountable for it. And so people are looking at, like I said earlier, people are saying, hey, 2 years ago, I was paying something for a gallon of gas. Inflation was nowhere near what it is now, and now look what I'm paying for gas. And this is what I've been saying all along, and what I still think is going to be big in voters' minds when they go to the polls. Now, I do think, and I agree with you on this, that I do think some of these social issues are going to sway some voters, and we see things like abortion and stuff getting up there at the upper half now, or right on the cusp, 50%, I guess. Guns is in there. We don't know. That didn't break down saying it's people want more or less gun control. I think it's going to matter. I think the Democrats need to do, if they want to be serious and competitive this fall in a lot of races in these midterms, I think they've got to do a better job messaging their brand.
I agree. I couldn't agree with you more, but I think we're getting there. I think they are getting there. They are getting the message out, as are you and I on this podcast, for various different views and stuff. But I do think it is getting better, and I think the closer that we get to November, minds are going to start changing, and people are going to get fed up with the crazy and fed up with the ridiculous stuff. And the voters that aren't usually energized to get out there and vote are going to be getting out there and voting in elections because there's been so much weight put on how the midterms actually are a bigger deal than the every 4-year presidential election. I think people are starting to wake up and figure it out that this is really important. And myself included in that, right?
I do think you've got a point about energy. I think there's going to be energy if there's energy right now, I think it's going to translate to energy this fall. I saw an ad recently that the Democrats had put that was out there that was talking about if you allow or you're voting for some of the hard or far right, I think they said MAGA Republicans or whatever it was, look at what they're taking away. The ad talked about abortions and some of these other things. And so that's what I'm saying. If the Democrats want to be competitive, they've got to take what's coming their way and run with it.
100%. Now, switching gears. So I wanted to talk about some of the feedback that we got this week. So a buddy of mine that I haven't talked to in a fairly long time reached out, and at the beginning of the show I mentioned that we crossed over to the Air Force, so he is in the Air Force and reached out and said he's definitely subscribing and following, so hey, there's a new listener for us. He also mentioned something that I thought was pretty interesting that said about 10 years ago he went fairly hard Republican, and then Trump kind of ruined that all for him, and the modern Republican Party is just something that he can't follow, which I do think is something that is being felt for a majority of the country. But either way, just interesting, and I appreciate everybody reaching out. We've talked about it before, but please email us your thoughts and comments, or if you want us to talk about specific races or ideas or things going on in the political megaverse, reach out to us. Email address is CameronandPhil@gmail.com, CameronandPhill@gmail.com. So we're glad to have your feedback. And then, Cameron, you want to plug a Facebook page?
I do. I'd love to have you come onto our Facebook page and like our page. It's Pocket Politics with Phil and Cam. So please get on there, like it, follow it. We're putting some political stuff on there, etc. Kind of giving you a preview of what we'll be talking about on our next podcast, doing some wrap-ups on what we talk about in old episodes, etc. So please, again, jump on there and like our Facebook page. It is Pocket Politics with Phil and Cam.
And don't just like it and follow it, but share it with your network as well too, because we definitely need the listeners. We're doing better. We're trending up, but
we are growing.
We are growing, but it is not maybe the rate that we would be happy with. Somebody was telling me this week we got to start getting merch. Which I just said I don't think we're there yet.
Not quite.
If we sold merch to every single one of our regular listeners, that would be what, like 15 to 20 people probably.
Maybe 25.
Yeah, maybe 25.
But we do have listeners, and it does look like we're growing a little bit each week, and we do certainly appreciate that. So
yes.
Send us your thoughts, give us your feedback, and we'll be happy to run with it.
Fantastic. Well, is it time to dig into the January 6th committee hearing?
Let's go.
Okay, first big blockbuster piece of news. There are more hearings.
Yeah. More to come in September.
It looks like September we're going to have 3 more hearings. Hey, real quick, I think this is really good for Democrats moving forward. They've got Republican support on there with Cheney and Kinzinger, and they're exposing stuff that we thought we knew, but we didn't necessarily know. And the closer it gets to the election, the more important it is going to be.
So I will say that I think your last point, the closer it gets to the election, I think you're right. I think having hearings in September, fairly close, within weeks of the midterm, I do think that is a good strategy for the Democrats. You're right, they have some Republicans, although the Republicans are pushing back hard. Many Republicans, I should say, are pushing back hard, saying we wish we had an equal number of Republicans on the panel.
Yeah, I wish I had $1 million, Cam. I mean,
but there are two.
You don't always get what you wish for. I mean, and I will say that a lot of those Republicans pushing back, I mean, they addressed this within the first 10 minutes of the hearing, right? When they played that McConnell video of Mitch McConnell standing up in front of Congress late into the evening, in front of the Senate late into the evening when they, got back together, right, to address the certification of elections. And they played that video of him basically saying it was all Trump's fault. This should never happen. This is not a thing. The president is fully to blame for this. I mean, Mitch McConnell's words spoke for themselves. And for them to play that video early on in the January 6th committee hearing was, in my opinion, genius. Because it reminded us of what the sentiment was at the time. And a lot of Americans have since forgotten about that sentiment that they had immediately after January 6th.
I think another part that they highlighted well the other night was the Pence being in danger. And I think people may not have realized just quite how in danger Mike Pence was that day, but they actually had clips of Secret Service members calling or phoning home or whatever saying, hey, I may not make it out of here. So I think they did a good job pulling out, or at least showing the country what kind of danger Mike Pence was in that day.
Absolutely. That audio clip, and then them stressing the fact that, he was feet and seconds away from actually basically being lynched in the Capitol. It is amazing. I mean, it's crazy to think that the impact of that audio of the Secret Service talking about, their lives seriously being in danger was crazy to me. I mean, because that's it's a fairly stoic branch of the government that you don't hear a lot about and doesn't typically make a lot of news, and they're kind of like very highly regarded. And for them to feel that their own lives were being threatened blew my mind.
Some other highlights: Matt Pottinger and Sarah Matthews were certainly, their testimony was good. I thought Matt Pottinger being the Deputy National Security Advisor, Sarah Matthews being the Deputy Press Secretary, talking about how they were disturbed by the Pence attacks. When I say Pence attacks, disturbed by some of the tweets that President Trump had put out about Pence letting him down, etc., while the rioting was going on. Something that Sarah Matthews brought up was his supporters latch on every word and tweet. And she brought that up because she had worked as his deputy press secretary, so she knew the power of his social media and his words, and so as she said it, they latch onto those kind of things. So.
Yeah, it was really interesting, and again, it should go without saying, but we'll point it out that those are both, like, basically career Republicans.
They are,
right?
Yes. Yep. Matt Pottinger was a Marine Corps veteran.
Yep, and also a lifelong Republican, right?
He is.
And not only that, but he's not just, people, you can use the fancy words, Deputy National Security Advisor, blah, 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 whatever, that title, that it should be known to the people who may not know the way the government is structured and the way things work, but he's a big fucking deal.
Let's not forget...
Right? That's a huge position.
So, definitely is. Let's not forget, Sarah Matthews had been with the president, or former President Trump, during his campaign. She had been with him for a while.
Yeah.
So she had obviously knew him very well, knew the marketing, etc. behind it. And so for her to say, like, well, yeah, I know firsthand how much people hang on those words that he says, again, that was strategic how they brought that out.
And not just that, but they both tried to influence the former president, into getting out there and talking about it and telling his supporters to stop. They tried to influence that for over 3 hours. With no action taken. And, I also, just to add on real quick, we don't need to talk about it that much, but again, I mentioned a couple weeks ago, the visualizations and, like, those maps of the White House were really good. They've continued to be good, and they were really good this week, showing, it's like, they showed you the TV with Fox News turned on, where the president is sitting in the dining room off the Oval Office watching the news. So, yes, he knew exactly what was going on.
What did you make of the video messages, or the when they were talking about the messages for the day of the attacks? What did you make of that?
Again, it's just kind of stuff that we all thought we knew was happening, and now we know, right? And it was a big deal. And not only, you had all this stuff going on, the president's watching it live on TV, taking no action. And not only is he taking no action, but he continues to tweet out. He continues to tweet out while they are invading the Capitol.
Which is what
Mike Pence betrayed us. And
is what had Pottinger and Matthews upset. Which is why Pottinger's like, when I heard that, I made up my mind, I'm resigning.
Yeah, and then he tried to call Tommy Tuberville, our football coach, congressman,
Senator.
I got it, but he's a football coach. Like, these are not the type of people that we need to elect,
Well, but Tuberville didn't. I think the recording I heard of Tuberville, he didn't go along with the president.
No, he didn't. He was like, hey, we're being attacked now.
We've got stuff to do right now, basically.
Yeah.
Which was get to safety. So
get their gas masks on and get to safety.
So from Tuberville's perspective, he wasn't going along with it that day.
Yeah, and I thought another thing that too, specifically talking about, the Deputy National Security Advisor, this guy Pottinger was amazing. He, one of the quotes that stood out really, like that I thought had huge impact was that the former president emboldens enemies and worries allies. I thought those 4 words, emboldened enemies, worries allies, were particularly impactful in the way that his testimony came across. What else do you kind of have? I know there was that video clip of the people walking to the Capitol and the Trump supporters, and that one guy said, like, electoral, and it just made me think, like, all these people are fucking idiots. And I'm not saying that every Trump reporter is an idiot or
You mean
sorry, Trump supporter.
supporter.
Yeah, I'm not saying that. I'm not saying that Republicans are idiots. I'm just saying that those people that were out there marching on the Capitol are idiots.
They weren't just marching; they were rioting.
Yeah, rioting at the Capitol. They're idiots. Like,
Well, that was. I mean, you mentioned the clip. That was. I don't remember it, or I don't have it memorized word for word, but it was a pretty crude sounding audio clip that they played. I mean, they were. I do remember the guy saying it's getting really intense and wild down here. I do remember some things like that. Other things. I mean, there was the video clips of the president the next day trying to record the messages. That kind of stood out where he didn't want to talk about the election being over.
yeah, which is crazy. I mean, I think that makes him look really bad. But they also had video clips making McCarthy look really bad and other Republicans look really bad. I mean, the whole thing is just really bad. And I don't think we can stress that enough. Is regardless of what side of the aisle you fall on when you vote, it was awful. It was an attack on our nation. It was definitely an insurrection.
Going forward, I think what remains to be seen now is what they bring out in September. As you talked about, they're going to have 3 more coming out in September, and I think we need to watch down the road what impact these have from a legal standpoint and who they impact, and then ultimately what happens in the midterms in November, how much of an impact this has. These are all things we're waiting to be seen, like how much the needle has moved. And you and I have talked about the needle has moved a little bit from this. So
yeah, I will say there is a legal impact coming from this because did you see the clip of Merrick Garland talking about?
I saw it.
I mean, that just shows you there is going to be legal implications because Merrick Garland basically is like one of these low-key guys who's always super mild manner, and for him to like cut off that reporter and say, no person is above the law, and then repeat himself, that was pretty impactful. And he said it really sternly, and you could tell that he was passionate about.
He did, but I will also say some of that probably comes from him just being tired of hearing day in and day out people across the country saying, Merrick Garland, what are you doing about this? Because he has. I mean, people all over TV, radio, etc. are beating him up. Oh, what are you doing? What are you doing? So some of that may just be some frustration of his that boiled over. I think deep down inside, I don't think Merrick Garland really, or President Biden really wants to be charging Trump with or going after Trump on some of these things. I think for the fear that
as much as I would love to see that guy go to jail,
he's not.
I just think I think it's bad for American politics, right?
That's
like we should not be locking up our political enemies.
And that's why I think deep down inside Merrick Garland, President Biden, etc., I don't think they're terribly interested in pursuing that. But we will see what comes of this. I mean, it's not over with, and we know there's going to be some more hearings coming into September. So
okay, can we talk about real quick? I mean, we can't avoid talking about Josh Hawley.
If you want to talk about Senator Hawley, quick, go ahead.
So I know you keep pointing at your notes, but I can't read that. So you'll just have to lead in. You'll just have to lead in when we get done. But I just want to say the video clip of Josh Hawley running scared was probably one of the funniest things I've seen. And I've seen various things on social media, on Facebook and on Instagram. It's like they're playing the Benny Hill music,
There's been all kinds of stuff.
There's been all kinds of stuff. But basically the greatest reaction that I could have to that came from Officer Fanoni immediately after the press conference when he just said, he's like, tried to kind of be serious about it. He said, in my honest opinion or whatnot, Josh Hawley's a bitch. And Josh Hawley ran like a bitch. And I thought for that, particular Capitol Police officer, the guy with the neck tattoo and that's amazing.
If our listeners want to catch that, the Lincoln Project has it up on their site, that interview you're talking about.
Yeah, and various other sites. But that was literally an amazing interview of him just talking about Josh Hawley being a bitch and running from office, not for office,
So again, we'll see where this goes here, certainly, like we talked about from the legal standpoint, and then looking at our upcoming races. So I want to use this time now. I just said the races. I want to segue into looking at a couple of races that are out there. And the first one I want to take a look at is the Minnesota governor race. And
your home state.
I am, yeah. So. I'm from Minnesota, so...
And we actually have listeners in Minnesota, right?
We do, yeah. We've seen in our breakdown, we've got some listeners in Minnesota. So right now, Tim Walz is the incumbent governor up there in Minnesota, a Democrat. He's running again. Well, the Republicans Party of Minnesota has endorsed Dr. Scott Jensen. Now, there is still technically a primary to go in the state, but the Republican Party has thrown their name behind Scott Jensen. So basically what you've got is Walz versus Jensen. And this right now looks like a really close race, all right? A poll in June had 42% for Walz and 40% for Jensen, which has it very close. Minnesota is a blue state, or has been a very blue state, all right? In presidential elections and governors, senators, etc., Minnesota has come off time and time again as a blue state. The last few election cycles, though, we have heard more and more about Minnesota trending red. There's been a number of Republicans in that state running for various races that have been talking about it trending that direction, getting excited, thinking that they're gonna win. But I will tell you, Walz himself is took a lot of heat during the coronavirus pandemic. He's got a narrow approval rating. He's narrowly got a positive approval rating by a slim, narrow margin on jobs. But the majority of Minnesotans disapprove of how he's handled crime. And most feel Minnesota's on the wrong track. Governor Walz took a lot of heat during the George Floyd riots up in Minnesota, too.
Yeah.
And so that's a lot of stuff that Dr. Scott Jensen is using, to really push against Walz. I've looked at some of Jensen's ads, and he's really trying to run with that. Now, Walz is trying to paint Jensen as more of a MAGA Republican, which is interesting because Dr. Jensen was a Minnesota state senator who was considered very moderate. Mm-hmm. And during the last few years, going into the coronavirus pandemic, he came out as a very outspoken guy against the COVID measures, took definitely a different stance on things than what Governor Walz did. So
yeah, but you can never judge what a person did a year ago.
Well, sure,
right? Because we've seen so many people change.
Yeah, no, I agree with you on that.
I mean, if you want to judge a guy or somebody by what they were doing a year to 2 years ago, I could just completely turn that upside down with 2 words: Kristen Sinema.
Well,
Well,
and so I'm not going to disagree with you on that, but again, this is kind of the background of what we've got. So we've got I think is going to be a very, very close race up there in Minnesota. The polls have it almost neck and neck. Again, Minnesota's got that blue reputation, but it has been trending more and more red. And I think Dr. Jensen's going to really give Walz a run for his money this fall. I'm hesitant to really call this race either way. I will just tell our listeners to keep an eye on it. And I know our listeners from Minnesota certainly are keeping an eye on it. So definitely a race out there that's going to be close, and definitely one that we are going to keep our eyes on here as we get closer to the fall. One more race I wanted to take a look at, though, was the Missouri Senate race. Have you been following that one at all, Phil?
So I've been following the news that's coming from that race, as in
there's plenty of it.
The political ad that Eric Greitens put out. And again, this is an unfortunate week that we have to mention multiple different Navy veterans who are doing very bad things.
He is a Navy veteran.
Yeah, and a SEAL, which was, how you can go from being a Navy SEAL to making a political ad like this blows my mind. But if you guys don't know what I'm talking about, one of the top Republican candidates, this guy Eric Greitens, and keep in mind we don't really have a good look at this race yet because they haven't had their primaries, but Eric Greitens, former Navy SEAL, made this ad where he's promoting hunting rhinos
while carrying a shotgun.
And cocking it in the ad, and then it shows him with SWAT teams invading somebody's house,
bursting into somebody's living room, I think.
Yeah, to catch. And I'm assuming that would lead me to assume they're not talking about the animal rhino.
I don't believe they are.
I have a feeling they're talking about the Republicans in name only. But it's alarming that there's a video of them basically conducting an unlawful search and seizure, which is a clear constitutional violation. I mean, there's a lot of really troubling things associated with that video. What else you got about specifically about that?
There is a lot of news coming out of this one. I mean, they haven't had their primary yet. The Democrats, on the Democrat side, it looks like it's coming down to a couple here. Lucas Kunce, who's really kind of branding himself as a populist. he's attacking both parties. He's a Marine Corps veteran. He comes from a humble background. Here's a guy who talked about watching his parents struggle and unable to pay bills due to medical expenses and all these things as a kid. And so he said that's branded him and kind of made him the person he is. And his main challenger on the Democratic side is a lady named Trudy Bush Valentine. She's a Anheuser-Busch heir, so it certainly comes from money.
And she's in the clear lead right now. So
she is, although I think Kuntz is giving him a run, or giving her rather a run for her money. She's had a little bit of controversy about her participation in something called a veiled prophet ball back in 1977. This has been in the news a little bit down there in Missouri lately. Apparently, this ball had its origins with former Confederate officers, way back in the post-Civil War era. A lot of people said these, continued on into the 70s and such, 80s as very racist tones. I don't think African Americans or Jews were allowed to participate until like 1979 or 80. But she was a participant in 77, so she's taken a little bit of heat on that.
But I will be honest with you, and there's not a whole lot of polling out there, but she is leading by quite a bit. So it looks like she is probably the clear front runner for the primary. But not to segue back to the Republicans, but I do want to talk that even though Greitens was largely ahead for a majority of it, he has since fallen.
So he has, and I've actually got some poll numbers that recently came out of Missouri with a Trafalgar poll. There are three kind of key front runners on the Republican side. We've talked a little bit about Greitens, who, by the way, is a former governor of Missouri who had to resign due to basically in 2018 due to like an invasion of privacy charges and
checks with the video. Yeah. I mean,
he's also had some sexual assault allegations brought on him. He's had a lot of baggage. But there's also the Attorney General of the state of Missouri, Eric Schmidt, is in the race, and then Representative Vicky Hartzler is in there as well. Now, Hartzler, she's had Josh Hawley endorse her, but Donald Trump has said he will not. He has not given her the endorsement.
Yep, and as of the latest poll, Schmidt is in the lead.
So I saw one recently here from Trafalgar out of there that had Hartzler at 24% with Greitens at 23.5%, and then just 1.2% behind that was Schmidt, with still 25% of Missouri voters undecided.
Okay.
So those are you may have something with Schmidt in the lead, but those are very close either way. I think it's a pretty close race in the Republican side.
Yeah, so I saw July, and it's weird that, there's not a lot of polls for the Democrats, but I guess it's not weird because we know that Missouri is basically
it's
a
pretty red state, yes.
But there are a ton of polls for the Republicans going into the primary.
And they're garnering a lot of news, too.
Yeah, and that is the other thing. They're garnering a lot of news. So that's probably why. But
I will tell you, I want to drop a wild card in, though, on this race. And one of the reasons that I am attracted to it, you just said it, Missouri's a pretty red state. And honestly, I think in a normal year, we wouldn't probably even be talking much about this because Hartzler or Schmidt would probably run away with this thing. Greitens, though, has so much baggage that he's very controversial. Now, I did see some hypothetical head-to-head polls that had Hartzler against a Democrat, and she had double-digit leads over them.
Mm-hmm.
Same thing with Schmidt. Now, you throw Greitens in a hypothetical poll against a Democratic candidate in the state of Missouri, that dips down into the single digits.
Yeah.
And here's the wild card, though. That is a man named John Wood, who is announced he's going to run as an independent in the state of Missouri. He definitely leans to the right. He, by the way, was a former January 6th committee investigator. And Wood, I think I read the other day, he's collected 10,000 signatures, which I think is going to get him on the ballot in Missouri. But the reason this becomes a wild card is with Wood in there as basically a Republican, if he is on it, which it looks like he will be now in the election, that's going to, let's face it, take votes away from the Republicans. And if Greitens is the candidate who we've already seen doesn't poll that far ahead of the Democrats anyway, I will tell you, if they put Greitens there and then Wood as an independent, that may just put a Democrat in the Senate from the state of Missouri.
Yeah, I'm not going to hold my breath on that one. And I do know, hey, I will say great job on picking these two races because we do have listeners in both Minnesota and Missouri. But I'm not sure that I'm gonna hold my breath. I mean, it would it surprise you?
Well, I will tell you this much. It surprises me right now that we're even talking about Democrats being competitive in Missouri in this race. So,
True.
So I'll be honest with you. In 2022, I don't know if anything surprises me anymore.
Okay.
Now, am I going to go out on a limb and predict that a Democrat is going to win this race? I don't want to go that far, but I will say, especially with Wood jumping in there on this independent, but even though he's really a Republican, but he'll run as an independent, I think this race becomes interesting. We'll see how the primaries play out. But would you agree with me, Phil, if Greitens is the nominee from the Republicans, this becomes a closer race?
I would. Yes. Yeah, I do agree with that. I would be very surprised if a Democrat comes even close in this race. And I will tell you that I think, and again, we can agree to disagree, but I think Beto has a better chance at winning Texas than a Democrat winning this race in Missouri.
Interesting. We'll see how that one plays out come the fall. Looking at the clock, though, looks like we are about out of time this week, even though it's been a lot of fun. It's time for our parting shots here. You want me to kick that one off, Phil?
Yeah, go for it. I think are we doing the battle of the air? The battle of the Chris's this week?
Well, we were talking about our little endings here a little bit ago before we started the broadcast, but I will start. So my parting shot this week is for Chris Wallace, and I want to say this as Chris Wallace. Come out, be out there more, right? You leave Fox News in December to go to CNN, and I understand why. This was CNN's going to have him as part of the CNN Plus streaming network they had that didn't even get off the ground.
Yeah, like completely failed. I mean,
it doesn't even get off the ground. And next thing you know, Chris Wallace is like put in the closet. This guy is a longtime journalist. His father was as well. I think he's done an excellent job over the years covering events. And I want to see more of him.
Moderating the debates. He did a great job moderating the debates.
Yeah, people on both sides of the aisle have heavily praised Chris Matthews for his coverage of various things over the years. I said Chris Matthews. I'm sorry. Chris Wallace. Chris Matthews. That leads into something else. But with Chris Wallace, though, out there, yes. And I see occasional clips of him on CNN, and supposedly he's got a show that's on Sunday nights or going to be on Sunday nights. What I'm getting at, though, is I think CNN should have a lot more of him on there. I heard that CNN wants to get back into more just kind of headline news and get away from some of the opinion-based stuff that they've gotten into in recent years.
He's the man to do it. I mean,
what better person, than him to get in there and to showcase. And so, again, CNN, put him out there more. I think it would help your network, and I miss seeing more Chris Wallace. So
CNN's reputation is in the dump, and for both sides, no matter how you feel. I mean,
but Chris Wallace could help them.
Yeah, I was just going to say, if they want any shot of repairing that anytime soon, they need to get him out there. He needs to be the front face of CNN.
And to my point, he works for the network. That's get him out there. So that's my parting shot here. Phil, over to you.
Okay, well, I will see your Chris Wallace, and I will raise you Chris Hayes. So
I thought you were going to say Chris Matthews.
Not Chris Matthews, but I just want to talk about, I think he's been doing a great job lately on MSNBC. He has his show All In. That is incredible, and he's kind of ever since Rachel Maddow has kind of broken off to just a once-a-week show and then special event kind of newscaster. Chris Matthews, I think, has taken a lot... Sorry.
Now you did it.
Now I did it. Thank you. Why'd you have to put that name in our head now? Chris Hayes has done an excellent job kind of filling that void, hitting hard with very direct news, but also kind of getting a little bit of a twist in there. And I think he's a big-time... I don't want to say up-and-comer because I feel like he's already there. He's primetime. I mean, he's opposite Tucker Carlson, right? So he is primetime news, but he is somebody that needs to be out there on the national level with not just MSNBC, but getting out there. And the reason why I wanted to talk about him was because right after the January 6th hearing on Thursday, He was on one of the late shows, and he gave a great interview. It was really good to watch, and it's like I don't usually watch that show, but I was happy to watch it with him being the guest on there. And so, shout out to him. I think he's doing a great job, and again, I think that's somebody that more people probably need to pay attention to because he is really killing it on primetime news. With that being said, do you want to give the Facebook another plug so that people can go there and share it with their friends and family and all that stuff?
Absolutely. Please jump on Facebook and like our page, and definitely share it with your friends. Pocket Politics with Phil and Cam.
Absolutely. And with that being said, I will give one last shameless plug of the email, Cameron and Phil at gmail.com. Remember, it's Phil with 2 L's. And go give us feedback. Like I said, we like to hear, we were, before we started recording today, we were looking at some of our analytics and where people are listening. And we were kind of shocked, honestly, right?
There's several states represented on there.
Yeah, and so I don't know how that's measured, but yeah, definitely send us. If you've got a local race out there that you want us to talk about, we can do the research and get on it. And please keep giving us your feedback. We love to hear it.
I am chomping at the bits to have somebody send information. Hey, would love tell us about this race in a state. I would love for someone to email us.
Yep, or even if it's just you want us to talk about your state, politics that matter to you,
yep.
We will gladly go in and come up with some interesting, goings on in the political world in your state.
So definitely send us your feedback because we read it. It's important to us, and we appreciate each and every one of our listeners. So
yep. And look us up on Facebook. I mean, I try and post several things on there. Last week, at least a couple of things that I thought were interesting.
I put some stuff in there.
Yeah, so keep an eye on it, and we'll keep the content coming. And I guess with that being said, until next week.
Definitely until next week. It's been a lot of fun, folks.
All right, thanks for listening, and we'll see you in a week.
Until next time.
All right, bye, Cam.
Bye.